What's up, everybody, and welcome to One Man's Opinion. And today, we're talking about Pride and Prejudice. The movie I'm reviewing will be the 2005 version. I think there is an older version that was made in the 90s. Just recently watched the 2005 version, so that's the one that we're going to be reviewing. Now, I have not done a romantic drama type movie. I haven't even done a rom-com on this channel yet, and so I sat down and I'd never actually seen it before. Romantic movies aren't really my bag, and I know that's like a macho thing to say, that like guys are like, romance movies suck. But I actually know a lot of guys who like romance movies a lot, kind of secretly behind closed doors. I'm not really one of them, and I'll tell you why. Romance movies are pretty paint by numbers. They are basically all the same movie. And it always revolves around a guy and a girl who shouldn't really want to be with each other for some reason, who begin to like each other, and like circumstances keep causing them to bump into each other often. And then somewhere mid movie, mid to late movie, they will run into some sort of issue. One of them will have said something and it'll get like taken out of context, and it'll get back to the other one and they'll be like, oh, you're exactly who I thought you were. And then it's like, oh no, now they're not going to be together. And then you have like the end of the film that's always like the catch the plane at the last second, or, stop the wedding before it happens, or whatever it is, where the guy or the girl, whoever is chasing at that moment, gets there and proves their love ultimately in the end. And then it's happily ever after from there. Though there may be slight variations to that very by-the-books way of putting a romance movie together, by and large, they all follow that detailed structure. And so, to me, it's a very boring genre because they're basically all the same, and the ones that I find that I like the most drift at least from that pattern somewhat. Having said all that, I don't really hold that. The reason I'm opening this way, I know I typically start with the negatives. The reason I'm opening this way and talking about that aspect of romance movies is because I'm not going to hold that against this movie in particular, because it's based on a book that was written in 1813, I think, 1803, 1813, one or the other, something early 1800s at least, very early 1800s, by Jane Austen. I can't really fault her because her work is probably a big reason why romance movies follow that pattern. I can't hold that against her. I can't hold that pattern of cinema against her, seeing as she wrote the book 90 years before the first movie was ever even made. Having said all that, my own prejudice against romantic movies in that regard will not be held against this film. I tried to step back and take a non-biased look at the film and see what was good about the film and what did I not like about the film. And that's what I'm going to tell you about. And as always, I will start with the negative. There were certainly some negatives. There were certainly some positives. First of all, the main negative and my biggest gripe with this film is that Darcy is just the most wooden, boring character ever. And look, my fiance is a big fan of Jane Austen, and we watched this movie together, and she, told me that Jane Austen wrote her male characters that way as a response to the way female characters were often written at the time. They were often written very boring, or they were written poorly. Their characters didn't get a whole lot of development. They were all kind of paint by numbers, and so Jane Austen wanted to reflect that and write her male characters that way, which I understand. But this isn't a review on the book. This isn't a review on what was going on at the time or what social structure looked like at the time. This is just a review about the movie, and cinematically, regardless of why the character was written that way, it just doesn't work. Frankly, he is a snooze. Darcy isn't just a quiet guy. He is legitimately just boring, just so dull for the majority of the film. And anybody who's screaming at the monitor right now, but you don't understand the books, the character, I don't care. It's not about the book, okay? So if you've got to bring in an outside source, I do this all the time. If you have to bring in an outside source to make your movie better, then your movie has failed, okay? If you miss something in the explanation of your film, whether it's character development, whether it's understanding someone's background to understand their motivations, if I don't get that from the movie, it doesn't matter about the outside sources. I'd say the same for a comic book film. If you have a comic book movie that comes in, if the character is wooden and horrible to watch and boring, then it doesn't matter what his character is like in the comic books. You need to make it entertaining. Quiet characters can be very, very entertaining. Rorschach in Watchmen is a very quiet character. He's got that deep, gravelly voice, and he doesn't talk just a whole lot, but when he says something, you listen. There are a lot of characters like that. You could go to any genre. You could bounce around to all kind of places and find characters who are generally quiet, but are still very, very interesting characters that you want to know more about, you want to learn more about. Darcy is not that way. He is just wooden and boring, and he is the biggest minus to the film, by far, to me. Another negative is, and again, this goes back to the material. This goes back to the book, and I guess they were assuming that their audience had read it, which is dangerous. It can be a great thing for the audience that does sit down and say, yeah, I've read the book, so I understand everything that's going on. But if you haven't read the book, you're in my shoes when I sat down to watch the movie. And the negative is, I never knew when or where we were. Like, I could guess the location. Obviously, we were in England. Obviously, we were near London, somewhere in there. And I could guess around about the time period was probably not too far off from when she wrote the book itself. But that's it. You never get like, and it doesn't take much, is what gripes me the most is that it doesn't take much to just at the bottom of the screen in like little white letters say, location, year. Because here's the problem. Apparently, this movie covers, I think, and I could be very wrong about this because who knows, to my best guess, based on everything that goes on in the movie, I think that I was told, or maybe Harley told me, it takes course over like 3 years. But just watching the film, I thought like at best it took place over the course of like 6 months at best. It could have easily taken place over the course of a few weeks. You know what, now that I'm thinking about it, at one point in the movie somebody says something about this happened 6 months ago, something that you had seen earlier in the film happened 6 months ago or something along those lines, and I was like, I would have guessed that was just a week or two ago. I would not have guessed that 6 months had jumped from then to where we were now in the movie. And like, it would have been so easy to just, you don't have to make a show of it, it doesn't have to be loud, it doesn't have to take up the whole screen like in a Avengers movie where the planet or the location will pop up on the screen and it takes up like the whole screen. You don't have to have anything like that. All you have to do is like in little white letters at the bottom, name of the town pops up when you change scene and the year or the month or 6 months later, 2 weeks later. It would have been too easy. That's too easy to do, and it's frustrating as someone who has never seen the movie and hasn't read the book to sit down and watch the movie and not have a clue when or where we are at any given point. Names of towns are mentioned throughout the movie, Brighton and like Pemberley, I think. But even so, you might know when and where they are for that scene or for that moment, but then that scene ends and you jump and you're who knows how far into the future, and then also in a new location, and you're trying to remember, wait, where is this place? Have I seen it before? If not, where am I now? And so it's hard to track, and I don't think that it would have been difficult for them to make it easier to track. Is it a huge deal? No, but is it a big enough deal to take off a few points and get some minuses going? Yeah, for sure, because it's frustrating not having a clue when or where you are. I would say the third major complaint that I have isn't so much a complaint, and I'm doing it at the end of my negatives because it's both a negative and a positive. And so I will use this to transition into the positives. And that would be the camera work. Now, at the beginning of the film, I said out loud, the camera is beautiful. The camera work is beautiful. It's magnificent. They have these outdoor establishing shots of these beautiful homes and these beautiful landscapes, and at times the camera will have long tracks with no cuts where it starts in one section of a house and goes in and throughout, and people are moving and talking and they're communicating and they're going about their day, and it makes the movie feel so real and so lively because you have all these interactions happening as the as the camera just kind of moves throughout and takes a turn here, and like you'll see another couple characters here, and then it'll go outside and then, you know, kind of circle around a backyard and maybe come back in. And it's just long takes where actors, even when they're not on camera, are having to move and hit their marks and say what they need to say, because eventually that camera's going to come back around and catch them again mid-conversation. And it's really beautiful. Cinematically, just the camera work is beautiful and astounding. There are also scenes where they'll be like at a ball, and they make it feel so crowded at these balls, because even though the camera will centralize on whoever the character is that they want you to focus on right now, even though the camera centralizes there will be like 20 plus other people in the shot scrunched together, all talking, and it feels so crowded. And it's brilliant. By that same token, I brought this up in negatives for a reason, there are some really weird choices that are made in this movie. At times, something will happen, and I don't know what the director was thinking, if it was supposed to be played as comedy. Occasionally, something would happen, and it would just be like a snap zoom in on someone's face, just really close, like something you would see in an old spaghetti western or in a Tarantino film, where something would happen and it was just like zoom in real tight on the face, like somebody would get surprised and they'd be like and it, right there on the face. And it's just, that's so weird for a romance movie. Like, why? I couldn't understand, for a movie that was shot so beautifully and complex, to have these super goofy camera cuts felt just super out of place for me. And it didn't fit the genre, it didn't fit the atmosphere, it didn't fit the whole thing, the thematic feel of the movie. It just didn't fit it at all, and that was very curious to me. And so the camera work, while extremely beautiful and extremely complex and just amazing to watch at times, was also head-scratching. And so that will end the negatives and also grab a positive, kind of something that evened out there. I would say overall, the camera work was probably more of a positive than it was a negative, but still, it was worth mentioning that there were just some weird choices. Like, it looked very Western at times, or it looked very Tarantino at times. To the positives, I mentioned humor when I was talking about the camera work. This movie has a lot of humor in it, and the writing is astounding. It allows for this. The witty banter and the excellent acting really give this movie a sense of humor that is truly its own. And if you're not paying attention, of course, if you have an English accent, it's probably easier to pick up on the subtleties. But for me, there were times where I was like, having to really focus on what was being said, because the accent is so much different than mine that if I didn't pay close attention, it would just sound like another language almost. And so you have to, because they talk so much quicker, they talk a lot faster than I do. And so their words come out very different with a different accent, and then also very fast. So I have to really focus in. But if you take the time to focus in on the conversations, the things that are being said and the things that are happening, there's a lot of humor. There's a lot of comedy in this film. And I think it is beautifully done, masterfully done, and gives this film a huge breath of fresh air. It's really one of the strongest points of the film for me, is that while it is a very dramatic movie and there are serious themes, there are questions posed about social class and money, the haves versus the have-nots, and women's place and men's place in a different time, and all these different important questions that were asked then and should still be being asked today. All these things are looked at and examined, so very serious conversational themes happening in this movie, but while also maintaining such a beautiful sense of humor. There were several times in the movie where I found myself laughing. You get used to characters acting a certain way, and you come to enjoy when they're on screen, because they're just kind of a goofy character, and they're a lot of fun to watch, and then how they react to things, and then the interactions between certain characters with other characters. There was a lot of really good comedy, and I think that will springboard me into my next positive, which was the acting. The acting in this movie, top to bottom, is phenomenal. It's an awesome cast. Keira Knightley obviously kills it in her role. I thought she did an amazing job. And so from top to bottom, the acting lends itself to the comedy, because the characters are so involved, you can't help but feel that realism, that sense of, when an actor goes so far to do such a good job to bring their character to life, you can't help but feel like the characters are more real. The actors really give those characters life. And then when characters are more real, you empathize and you see yourself in their shoes more and more. And that way, when those moments of comedy do happen, it doesn't have to be a Will Ferrell style of humor, but just something small that might happen in my life or might happen in your life that we relate to. And that's what makes it funny, and that's what makes us laugh. I think that their excellent acting ability to draw you in and to make these characters very realistic is a testament not only to the acting but the writing of the characters. Be that, Jane Austen's doing or the writers who helped convert the book into the movie. Very well done. I will kind of close on this thought. The writing, the acting, all the humor, the camera work majority of the time, all really, really good. The movie overall is very enjoyable. It's a fun movie to watch. It really is. And as someone who isn't just the biggest fan of the romantic genre, I really found myself enjoying this film overall. I hated Darcy. I was like, this character, and that's another thing about romance movies. I knew when Darcy walked into the room at the beginning of the film, the first time you seen him, it was like, oh, yep, I can tell already. That's the one. That's the Keira Knightley love interest. Without having seen any movie, without having read any books, I haven't even, I was probably, 12 years old, when this movie was in theaters or had commercials on TV. So I didn't remember. Without even any information, immediately like, oh, that's the guy. And then it's like, this guy's just so lame. He's just so dreadfully boring. He's dull. And that's the word I kept using. The dude's just so dull. I can't stand him. But regardless of all that, the positives far outweighed the negatives. At the end of the day, I'm giving Pride and Prejudice an 86 overall. All right. Thank you for watching. Thank you for stopping by. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. Don't forget I got a Patreon if you're interested in supporting the channel. All you got to do is go to the About button or the home. Just go to my page and go to like my About section or, the homepage or whatever, and you'll see a link to Patreon there. I appreciate you watching this video, and I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, or if you didn't, drop down in the comments. Let me know what you enjoyed about it or what you didn't enjoy. Let me know what I could have done better. Did you not like the review? If you didn't like the review, be sure to let me know down in the comments. Just don't get mad about it. Remember, this is just one man's opinion. Thanks.